All right, part 4. Let's see. Matthew 19 and verse 20. It's referring to the rich young ruler. All these things have I kept from my youth up. What lack I yet? Again, not the man in Romans 7. The man in Romans 7 is not saying he's kept all of these commandments. What lack I yet? Like he's sinless or something. The man in Romans 7 is not saying he's kept all the Lord's commandments. And this is supposed to be a Jew under the law, right? It's a rich young ruler. Or someone that's self-righteous. That's what they're saying. A saved person isn't going to say that he's keeping all the commandments. No one keeps all the commandments. What lack I yet? What pride? What complete pride? Again, doesn't match the man in Romans 7. Let's go on to, let's see, Luke 15 in verse 29. And this chapter is dealing with the prodigal son. But the one talking here is the elder brother, the Pharisee type of person. Luke 15 and verse 29. And he answering, referring to the elder brother, he answering said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve thee, neither transgressed I at any time thy commandment. And yet thou never gavest me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. Again, another self-righteous attitude, Pharisaical attitude, which matches a lot of these sinless perfectionists and these work salvationists and lordship salvationists. They say the same type of thing. Now, most of them aren't sinless perfectionists, granted, but so they're not going to say neither transgressed I at any time. They're just saying that the sins they're committing aren't as bad as the ones you're committing, which James 2:10 refutes that entire idea. But as you can clearly see, that the Pharisaical mindset is not in Romans 7. They're exactly opposites here. The man in Romans 7 is not saying, neither transgressed I at any time that commandment. No, he's saying he's a sinner. He's saying the good that he would, he does not, but the evil which he hates, that does he. That's the complete opposite of a Pharisee. The complete opposite of these Jews under the law that when Moses would read the law to them, they'd say, all these things we shall do. Is the man in Romans 7 saying that? No, if the man in Romans 7 was there, he would say, Lord, but we're sold under sin. The good that I would, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that do I. That's what they would be saying. Sin dwells in me. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the butt? That is not the Jews under the law. These unsaved Jews under the law, anyway. Or the Pharisees, which are like the super Jews under the law. They're completely saying different things. And here's a good one too. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 10 through 16. Verse 10. But God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit. For the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God. For what man knoweth the things of a man, save the spirit of man which is in him? Even so the things of God knoweth no man, but the Spirit of God, the things of God. Which would include the purpose of the law, being our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ. That's one of the things of God knoweth no man, but those that have the Spirit of God. Verse 12. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God. Let's see, let's go to verse 14. For the natural man, but the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. But he that is spiritual judgeth all things, yet he himself is judged of no man. For who hath known the mind of the Lord that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. Now let's just back up to verse 14. The natural man, referring to the flesh, the outer man, receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God. They're foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Well, in Romans 7:14 it says, for we know that the law is spiritual. You can't know that the law is spiritual unless you have the Spirit of God. That's one of the things of the Spirit of God. Knowing the purpose of the law is to reveal sin, not as not in a way to obey God and establish your own righteousness. Let's just go to Romans 10 for a second and prove that's what unsaved Jews were doing. And there's even saved Jews that did that. That they were saved, they had the Spirit of God, and then they were darkened. Romans 10, verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. You can't know the things of the Spirit of God unless you have the Spirit of God. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, in going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves unto the righteousness of God. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth. That's the spiritual aspect of the law. That it's not meant for you to be righteous in God's eyes. It's not a way to go and establish your own righteousness. It's so that you realize you're a sinner. Let's see, as it says in Romans 3, verse 19, now we know, there's that phrase again, we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and and all the world may become guilty before God. That is the purpose of the law. That's knowing the spiritual reason for the law. It's our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ. So the man in verse 14 is saved right off the bat, just starting at 14. That's how you know he's saved. And he says, for we know. So Paul's including himself in his audience. So he's not like going back in time. Oh, this was a time when I was unsaved. No, that's not what it says. For we know, including the audience members, we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. Saved person, clearly. If you can't see that, you're blind. Period. End of story. Okay, let's see here. Here's a good one right here. Romans 3, verses 5 and 9. Verse 5. But if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance? And then Paul says here, very interesting, I speak as a man. Very interesting. So if he's, this is very characteristic of the Pauline epistles. There are other examples of this, where if he's speaking in the persona of someone else, or under the, or with the perspective of someone other than himself as he currently is, these are the type of phraseologies that he uses here. I speak as a man. He's setting that up. He's kind of saying that that's what a natural man would ask. The flesh man. That's what he would say. I speak as a man. Where do you see that in Romans 7? Where do you ever see him say, I speak as a man, or I speak as one under the law, or something like that? He never says that once in Romans 7, verses 14 through 25. He never says that. He never sets it up, because that's the Pauline writing style. That's how he writes. He'll let you know, I speak as a man. I speak as one under the law. I speak it as this. That's how he sets it up. Not by saying, like he's going in the past, saying he's someone under the law without actually saying it. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. That's not how Paul writes. And if you say otherwise, you don't know anything about the Pauline epistles. You flat just don't. In verse 9 of Romans 3, what then? Are we better than they? Referring to the Jews. Better than the Gentiles? No, in no wise. For we have before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they are all under sin. And here's a good verse right here with Romans 3:23, all have sinned and come up short of the glory of God. It's a good proof verse for those that say that babies aren't born in sin, that we're not born with a sinful nature, and that we're not born condemned. You are, because it says Jews and Gentiles, that they are all under sin. It doesn't say that they, except their infants, are all under sin. No. And if that were the case, that's what Paul would be saying. He would include the exceptions. God's word does that all the time. If there's an exception, it's there. It's not ambiguous. It's not, it could be there, it might not be there. No. God's word is very specific. If there's an exception to a rule or something like that, it's stated clearly. It's not up for, up for grabs. Maybe it's this, maybe it's ambiguous. It could go this way, it could go that way, it could go back upright. No, he's clearly laying it out. So if it says all under sin, obviously not referring to Christ, as he goes on later in that chapter and says Christ is the righteousness of God. Obviously, then that includes infants. So that's a good proof verse for you guys out there to prove sin nature of infants. Here's a good one here too. Romans 2 verse 17. Behold, thou art called a Jew, and restest in the law, and makest thy boast of God. Is that the man in Romans 7? No! The man in Romans 7 is not resting under the law. The law is condemning him. The law, oh no! That's what it's not. He's not resting in the law. He's not making his boast of God because of the law. No, he says, the law is spiritual. I am carnal, sold under sin. That which I do, I allow not. For what that do I not. But what I hate, that do I. Now then, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. That's not resting in the law. That's in complete disarray. That's the law is pointing out your sin. That's not resting in the law. So it's not some unsaved Jew under the law. Unsaved Jews under the law rest in the law because they think that makes them more righteous than others. The man in Romans 7 doesn't think he's more righteous than anyone. He's saying, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? Those are completely opposite concepts. How did these people not see this? Let's see. All right, that's the end of part 4. See you next time.